Hello, everybody. This is Lynn Wenger. I am the founder of the Compliance Alliance, and I'm introducing to you our advisory council members. Our advisory council helps us form and shape what's happening in the industry around compliance, best practice, licensing, and it helps give us a pulse on what is happening in the industry and make sure that we bring that information to you as our followers and as our members. So I have a special guest with me today, Cindy Lenhof. Hello, Cindy.
Hi, how are you, Lynn?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad that you're here and a member of the advisory council. And we'll start with just a quick question for our followers. The advisory council is an invitation only role. And could you share why you accepted that invitation?
Well, I accepted it because I really have a great passion for, keeping children safe and sound while they're in care. And what I've learned throughout my career, which spans over 40 years in the industry, is that learning to live licensing every day, every hour of every day, is something that you have to almost practice with your team. And ultimately, bringing the alliance together will help us create resources for people that are in this business to learn how to do that. Because I've seen directors as a multi-site manager really struggle with living licensing, and part of it is they don't practice it every day. And so part of practicing it every day is having resources to remind them to practice it and to take that practice down to the teacher level and constantly keep an eye on what is happening in your classrooms and helping teachers understand that this isn't just a licensing requirement. This is why we have this requirement. And if we don't use it every day and do it every day, it could lead to something tragic.
You really hit the nail on the head with that, Cindy. And this is a quote that I attribute to you, living licensing. So it's not something you do, it's something, that you do one day and not the next day. You live it, which means it's continuous. But you also said another key word, which is practicing. You have to practice licensing in order to stay prepared to avert any potential injury or illness or citation. And just real brief on what's happening in the industry. Off camera, we were just talking that licensing is becoming more and more important in other areas too. Of course, the safety of children and staff, that's huge for their well-being. But what's the other emerging area where licensing's become vital?
Well, now that licensing records are online, each state has put the visits online. Certainly there's some redaction, but the non-compliances are out there. And it's a twofold situation. Parents can now look at your record and determine whether or not they want to be a part of your center. And I always highly encourage that parents do that. When people say, how do I choose a childcare center? Well, first and foremost, after you visit and you think this is where you want your children to go, then look at that aspect of their ability to stay in compliance. But it's also going to have huge repercussions if they are not staying in compliance with the cost of insurance or even the ability to get insurance,
That's
which
right.
is required by states if you are a licensed childcare center. So it's going to really impact their ability to, stay in business if they aren't in compliance.
Yes. We're going to have a whole segment on the insurance piece of this, but I can attest, as I'm sure you can, the concern over insurance has really raised awareness within the past 6 to 12 months. That's relatively new of the importance. Not that it wasn't important before, but the fact that it's in the spotlight because underwriters and insurers are choosing either to withdraw or to drop coverage altogether. So having our A game on for staying compliant, that our records are squeaky clean, because the insurance companies are looking at those too. So that's a much deeper, longer topic. But thank you for highlighting that. And so, as part of being part of the advisory council, tell us a bit about yourself, because this, in part, is the reason why I invited you to be part of the council. So tell us about your background.
Well, I started my career in early childhood back in 1980. I was a parent first and foremost. I went into a childcare facility that was advertising their preschool program, and I wanted to potentially enroll my daughter, who was 3, in their preschool. And in the course of being asking questions of the director, who was really proud of the program that she was uh, going to be offering. It was a brand new center. She must have picked up something. I think I asked a lot of questions because I was hesitant to leave my child with
I'm sure.
just
Yeah.
anybody. I was new in the city. My husband had gotten transferred to Oklahoma City at that time. And at some point she said, well, have you ever worked with children? And I said, well, yes, I have taught Sunday school, but I've never, worked for pay. Well, that was good enough back in the day. And I ended up going to work for 3 hours a day. And, my first encounter with licensing was as a teacher. But my director, fortunately, was someone that, didn't wait to talk to us about licensing. She made sure we understood what our part was.
Wow,
And
that's amazing. That's
and
amazing. Because
she
that,
was a woman before her time. She
yes.
really, really was. And so I felt like I had a really good beginning. But then I also learned when I became after I became a director and made sure that, I did not want to get written up. I didn't really make that connection about safety and not wanting to get written up. I just am a rule follower. I'm a type A.
Very.
And so in the end, what happened was, as when I became a multi-site manager, and there were so many balls I had to keep in the air with new centers opening, I kind of pushed that piece aside, and I started having issues with being in compliance. And that's when, that, aha moment is, you know what, I'm not keeping kids safe. And I can't sleep at night knowing that.
Yes.
Because if you're written up for lack of supervision or ratios, and so that was way back in the mid 80s. And I decided that I either had to leave the job or get in compliance, because that was truly a baseline.
Mm-hmm.
And so that began, my journey to live life, in licensing mode every day. And one of the things that I always tell directors that I'm mentoring or training, or I also was a vice president at the end of my career, and I would work with district managers on this. You never walk through a building that you don't walk through with the same eyes that licensing walks through with,
Good
because
advice.
it is the safety issue.
Yes.
And you have to stop and fix and teach any non-compliance you see
Right at the time.
right at the time. Because if you, as the director, the district manager, the vice president, walk past something that you know is a non-compliance and that could put children in jeopardy, then you've just given permission. And I really believe that that helped people understand that, I set the stage for that, and that every time I visited their school, that's what we did. And then eventually schools that were having issues with, staying in compliance, because when you're a multi-site manager of 150 schools in 5 states, as I was at the end of my career, you're not going to have the perfection you're looking for, but you have to constantly, stay on top of it. And that's when somebody that's struggling, there are leaders that can't stay in compliance and licensing because they don't have the leadership skills. So it may be a position that they can't, stay in. They may have another seat on the bus, as we say. but at
Yes.
the same time, requiring them to do daily licensing inspections and actually documenting those and being accountable to that help them learn to live licensing.
Yes, I can see that. And what I recall about your background, so not only as the parent and then a teacher and then a director and then a regional and a district and a vice president, you've seen the inside and the outside of private owned as well as corporate and franchise. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I have. I did a couple of years of consulting after I retired, after a 36-year career with one of our large companies. Did some consulting for a couple of years and in private childcare. And everybody has the same issue and the same challenge, but the same opportunity.
Yes.
And so this is an across the board situation that we as an industry need to work together to prove that we can do this.
Yes.
Sometimes I hear people say they want, forgiveness on some of their issues because they can't help it if they are out of ratio. Uh, they can't help it if they leave a child outside. And they really can. And one of the things that I always did when we had a serious non-compliance, again, when you have 150 schools spread out in 5 states, it's going to happen, is to get down into the root cause. Like that child was left outside. And we never want that to happen again because thankfully the child is okay. But what led to that? And you have to break down every piece. And every time it was the face to name process
Yeah.
wasn't followed.
Yep.
Every time. So we had to focus on making sure that face to name was followed the way it is meant to be followed. And the directors of centers have to take accountability for making sure that's happening in their classrooms by doing checks throughout the day.
That's right. That's right. Now let's talk a little bit about National Child Care Association. What is your role with NCCA, and tell us a bit more about that?
Well, that's another one of those positions that I acquired somewhat accidentally, I guess you would say. Fortunately, I had the opportunity to serve as a board member on NCCA back in the late 90s, early 2000s, as a representative for the company I worked for 36 years. But typically it was more state organizations that belonged, and somewhere along the line, they just kind of fell out. They were struggling, to attract members and do the work in a new world, I guess you would say. And so in 2019, I was serving on the National Early Childhood Program Accreditation Board,
Okay.
which accredits schools, which, by the way, if you are not in compliance with licensing and or you can't stay in compliance, you can't be accredited. And that's an important aspect in today's world, is getting that national accreditation. So we were approached by a couple of board members from the NCCA and asked to take over the NCCA and work to bring it back. And I was the only board member that was retired. And and I'd had a lot of experience with advocacy
Yes.
over the years. And so I was asked to be the interim director for 6 months while they did a search. And that was in August of 2019.
I was just going to say, keep
And
going.
nobody ever references me as the interim anymore. And I'm really proud and happy to be able to serve in this position and hopefully utilize my experiences, not only in advocacy, because anyone that works in this industry has a responsibility to be an advocate,
Yes.
but also to shed a light on the things that are needed to ensure the highest of quality. And that starts with the baseline of licensing. And right now, we're advocating, of course, for the workforce, because the workforce in early childhood is deteriorating. It's
Right.
very hard, intensive work for very low pay. And
This is
so
true.
that's what we're doing. And because we know that recruitment and retention of staff does go back to being able to follow licensing. You
I've
have
seen it.
people that have the passion for it.
You're absolutely right. So we're going to wrap up here, but I think I want our listeners to know that you are a resource to our members as well. I oftentimes will get questions about, well, my state doesn't have a child care association. How do I even start? You would be an amazing person and a resource, or where they're saying, I would like to do advocacy work, but I don't know where to start. So we're going to bring your voice back to this conversation, your experiences, some of the how-tos, but we're very grateful for you to be part of the advisory council with the Compliance Alliance, and we look forward to having you on future episodes and hearing more of your wisdom and expertise. So thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome, and it's an honor to work with you, Lynn, because I know that you share my passion for compliant, licensed childcare centers and homes. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It is indeed a passion. So it's great to be able to have those conversations with you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.